Perfect. Yeah, so I just just the amount of people in India is so intimidating to me. You see.
I can only imagine, because there are places that I find intimidating in terms of the number of people as well. And um, I was traveling to Switzerland a few years ago, and happened to go to this place called St. Moritz.
Mhm.
I actually walked for about 40 minutes without encountering a single human being walking in the opposite direction.
What was that like
Un,
for
un,
you?
Unimaginable. It was like being in a ghost town, or some kind of a dystopian world where there just are no people.
Oh, it's so
It was
funny.
crazy.
Yeah. And are there places in there's plenty of places in Australia it's like that, where there's not a whole lot of population. Is that right, Jules?
Oh, it's such a nice break when you're like in LA traffic all day, every day. And then you like where my parents live, it's like, because everything shuts so early as well, which I didn't realize. I'm so spoiled here with my Amazon Prime and things staying late every night till 9-10 o'clock. But over there, we have one day a week where the shops stay open till 9 p.m. and that's it. And then every other day it's 5:30. After that, if you didn't get done what you needed to do, you have to wait till the next day, and that's it. But because of that, after maybe 6 p.m., once everyone's like, most people work kind of a 9 to 5 for the most part, I would say. So yeah, after that traffic rush of everyone going home from their 9 to 5 and stores closing, it's just dead. Like where I grew up, I just laugh. I'm like, because I'll be like, oh, Mom, this is just so empty. The streets, there's no one. We haven't seen anyone driving anywhere. And she's like, yeah, it's very dead after 6 p.m. And then it was funny because when I went back a few months ago, we were my dad was just kind of like cruising past the beach, and there's like a busy street. It's really like 15 cars. And he's like, I hate this street. I have to sit in traffic for 5 minutes. I was like, just the perception, like, I'm like, Dad, this is not a big city at all. Like, you don't have a big city, Dad. But it was just funny. He's like, 5 minutes. I had to wait, in this line of traffic. I'm like, oh, horrible.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid living in this area, there's all the Indian nations. There's the Navajo, the Hopi, the Ute, and nations that are around us. And you used to, when you would drive through those places, you try to avoid driving through them at night, because one, they didn't really have fences, and so their livestock would roam across the road and stuff. And then if you got in an accident, then there was nobody around, and there's no cell service, there's no lights, there's nobody on the roads, and so you're basically on your own until morning. And so but now,
starts, right?
Yeah, exactly. But now they have like, there's and the thing with the Navajo is that they space themselves. They often don't live in communities. They space themselves out, so they're all over the place. I mean, you might be walking through the reservation and come across a small house, and then you would walk another couple miles and you'd see another one on the horizon, and things like this are really spaced out. But now they have electricity, which they didn't have electricity when I was younger. And so as you're driving across their territory in the middle of the night, you see these little lights in the middle of nowhere. They're famous for they have one post with one big light on it that just lights up their entire area.
That's like the meeting spot, is meeting at the one light post.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely a different culture. But it's fun to see how much they've developed and how they live over the years.
Oh, definitely.
It was really interesting in talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. One other thing that was interesting, because they didn't when I was in high school, when just in school in general, they didn't go to send their kids to school. It was very rare. usually because they were farmers and ranchers, and they would they didn't see the need for school. But and then as I probably had like 2 or 3 Native Americans and my class growing up. So it was interesting, but that now they're very diversified in culture. Matter of fact, they have a hard time trying to keep their youth on their lands, because they go to school or New York and so forth, and they don't come back, which is it's been a big problem for their communities. So they're trying to have programs that keep people there, paying for their college and so forth, that they return and do medical practice and stuff like that. Yeah, it's different in a lot of areas for sure. Well, I know we have a few people joining, and we're going to be starting here in about 4 more minutes. We're just chatting along, talking about different regions across the globe and so forth.
Yeah, now's the perfect time if you want to grab a coffee or some pen and paper to take notes. Now's a good time to do all that, because we just got a couple more minutes.
Mm-hmm. But that's kind of the thing that we're seeing now with the people are spreading out more now that they have the capability of doing remote work in a lot of places. So we'll see more of people working and living in those beautiful places where they weren't able to do so before. So it's great, and bringing opportunity to small communities.
Yeah, that's actually happening in Australia right now too, because they're trying to almost get people out of the big cities and into these smaller towns and smaller regions. So basically what Australia has done, because we're also really desperate for work because we have such a small population. I mean, I think the whole of Australia is like 20 million for the whole country. So it's we nothing on India, Sumit. Sorry, we're very far behind. So what they're doing is, when people want to come and work, if you live like in a big city and work in a big city, it's going to take a lot longer to get your permanent residency. So what they've done is kind of given a fast track option. So if you're willing to go work out in one of these smaller towns for 2 years, they give you your permanent residency. So I was like, wow, that's like a really great way to get people in. Because I mean, 2 years is, flies by pretty quickly anyway. And usually by then people kind of establish themselves and put down some roots in an area anyway. And it's, more than not, they stay in that one area. So yeah, that's what they're doing now to get people to come into the country. And they're like, here's permanent residency, just stay and work here for 2 years.
Right. And that's a great program to get people kind of distributed. In the U.S. right now, there's a lot of politics and surrounding the migrants that are coming into the country and the coasts. I mean, on the border, the southern border, and they're just overran down there with the amount of people, and so I know that there's places where they're trying to move people throughout the Texas and Arizona and those locations, but and also they're starting to move people across the nation as well, and redistribute them. But we often hear a lot of complaints in the U.S. because some of these northern towns simply don't have the infrastructure to even handle a few migrants compared to the border towns. So it's definitely something that's heated up here. So some of those programs could be well received.
Right, exactly. You got the space for it.
Right. All right. Well, we're about to get started here in 1 more minute.
Howard's here, Howard.
Hi there.
Yes.
Good morning, Howard.
Hey, Sumit, how are you? How you feeling?
Much better, thank you. How are you?
Good.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here. And Jules, when we get to the top of the hour, feel free to kick things off when you're ready.
Perfect. All right, let me just move all this so I can. Okay, beautiful.
Oh, and I'm sorry, just one moment here. I'm having a problem with I was just telling everybody earlier that I have power outages right now. So if I disappear suddenly, then you'll know what happened. Yes, and one moment here, because there seems to be little bit of issue getting the multi-stream going for some reason. Okay, I think here we go.
All right, we're there. We're good.
All right, we're all set.
Beautiful. All right, everyone. Welcome to the People Strategy Forum. My name is Jules, and it is such a pleasure to have you all hopping on today. I know with the holidays, it's kind of hard to stay on track, and sometimes, commitments go out the window at this time of year. So we really value that you took the time to hop on today, whether it's live on Zoom or through another streaming platform. It's really great to have you here. And if you've never been to a People Strategy Forum and this is your first time, we really want to welcome you and let you know what we do here. So the People Strategy Forum, we bring a panel of hosts together each and every week, and our goal is really to energize, elevate, and what I'm missing the other one. engage. Too much wine throughout the holidays. Sorry, guys. So that's what we do here. We want to help you and your companies and your organizations, your businesses, and we do that by bringing not just the panel of hosts, but also a guest speaker, and we cover all sorts of topics. So if you have never been here before, we have a full archive. You can always go back. So if you're on the live stream, if you're on Zoom, you would have seen the slide. We actually have Sumit Singla with us today. He's not only our guest speaker today, but he's a regular here on our panel. So if you enjoy the session today, be sure to come on back and hear what he has to say in other sessions as well. We are discussing everything to do with creating a consistent company culture in the era of remote work. So let me take you back to the panel of hosts and introduce you to everyone here. Now, this is usually our full panel here. We're missing a few people, again, with the holidays. We'll forgive them this time. We'll let it slide today. But we do have Howard here, and Howard is with CompTeam. He is a compensation advisor and strategist. He's great with creating compensation softwares and helping companies transform in the areas of compensation. And he's worked with big companies in the past like Citigroup, Barclays, to name a few. And we also have Sam, who is the founder and CEO of CompTeam. And CompTeam helps all sorts of companies transform with their talent initiatives, their compensation programs. And he also brings us this forum each and every week, helps find the speakers, brings everyone together, creates all the slides. And then we also have Sumit Singla, who is our guest speaker for today, and as I mentioned, a regular here on our panel. So I know you're going to enjoy this topic. He is just so knowledgeable, very intelligent, always has a lot of great opinions to share. He's a people strategist with, as we confirmed, over 18 years of experience now working in different HR and HR consulting roles. He really specializes in HR transformation for companies. He specializes in diversity and equity and inclusion. So I know he's going to have a lot of great opinions and thoughts on creating a consistent company culture in the era of remote work. A lot of C's, guys. So if you have any questions for Sumit or the panel at all, put them in the chat for us, address it to everyone so we can see, and we'll try to get those questions answered. And even if it's coming from LinkedIn or Facebook, some other platform, still write them in because we always come back and answer those questions as well. All right, Sumit, you know the drill. You know how things work around here. I'm going to pass things over to you.
Yes, Sumit.
Thank you so much, Jules.
Would just love to, Sumit, I mean, I know we just went through this a good background of your expertise and so forth, but would love to just dig in a little bit more and learn about a little bit how you got interested in management consulting and HR and people practices and so forth. I mean, what started that spark in your career?
That's an interesting question, Sam, and it's unfortunately the answer is quite boring. It's been purely incidental. So I started off my career right after, I graduated in civil engineering, and this was in 2002. Civil engineers were not very popular right then because of 911 and the fact that it was masterminded by a civil engineer. so I ended up joining the BPO industry, the business process outsourcing, and I was part of tech support for Intuit's backend services in India. And I think that was my first brush with an American corporation, and also with working with a multi-geography workforce, because customers were primarily North America based, and we had a workforce all over. So working with colleagues across the world and working remotely was, I mean, it was a completely new thing to me. And somewhere down the line, while training newer people, I developed an interest in training and HR. And to cut a long story short, went back to school after having worked for about 5 or 6 years, and came back into consulting, because I realized I love solving problems, and more often than not, the problems that a business faces can be solved by focusing on people. So I mean, every business, I believe, is a people business, whether you're into manufacturing, whether you're into consulting, IT, fintech, whatever. They're all people businesses at the heart of it. And therefore, that's what sparked my interest in consulting. And that's what I'm choosing as a career.
Well, your background really is aligned with our conversation today. So when we think about when you first started out and you worked in a local or regional practice in India, and then you went to a multinational practice, and the culture went from localized to a global based, where you're talking to people on the phone and they're distributed across the globe. How was that transition? I mean, when you going from working in a localized place to a global workforce?
It was interesting, because you're talking to somebody you've never really met. I mean, I'm talking about nearly 20 years ago, when technology wasn't as great as it is now, and you could barely hear people on the phone, forget about being able to see them. And being able to solve problems for somebody who's halfway around the world, I thought it was incredible. It was simply brilliant to not have things like screen share, but to have somebody describe what they're seeing on the screen, and you're walking them through some steps to fix what they're going through, and then somehow being able to align, being on the same page, and it was just unbelievable. So the longest tech support call which I took myself was about 14 hours, where I was on the phone with one single person for about 14 hours, and it was crazy. So it was maybe a couple of days before Christmas. They were trying to pay out their employees and really struggling. So of course we took lots of breaks in between, and there was lots of small talk while some files were rebuilding and stuff. But it was just great to have that kind of connection and find common ground with somebody so far away from you from a geographical standpoint.
Right. So it's definitely, things have changed now as far as technology and the remote environment. If we think, I mean, I was just, this is how fast things change, right? So just the other day, and being in America, we have a lot of these. Geico is a insurance cover here, and they're famous for their commercials with using this gecko, right? And the skit on the commercial was basically about working remote and with a speakerphone, and somebody interrupting you, or they're not coming in as quick, you can't hear them, or things like this. But I was just watching that commercial thinking, oh, this is really kind of out of date, now that we've been using Zoom for a period of 4 years or 5 years now consistently. And there's less chance of stepping on somebody when that's talking. We can see their face, and so we know when they're wanting to speak. And so a lot of those even this commercial is kind of out of date, and it's only been 3 to 4 years when we've had this video cast or Zoom and versus just speaking on speakerphones, right? So I
Oh,
wonder what's
absolutely.
next.
I mean, so I've got a 5-year-old at home who refuses to have audio calls. If you're speaking to her, for her, it's video first. I mean, I think that's the generation we're heading towards, and no
Holograms.
limits to what's next.
Yeah, holograms, Howard. And I know that and that's virtual presence is something that still was it's possible. There's been technology out on that since for over 10 years now, and in some large corporate boardrooms and so forth. And so I do think that's coming along, especially when we think about the metaverse and what that could bring if it ever rolls out appropriately, and meeting people more almost live face to face in that type of environment, right? Moving around. So yeah, I think that that is something to be said there. But there has been growing pains in the remote work, and as we've been talking about, a lot of different things. So what are the most common growing pains have you seen or have you witnessed, Sumit, as being for companies and a struggle for their culture?
I think the biggest pain with remote work has been the element of trust. So how do you, as a manager, as a leader, how do you make sure that what you expect should be done is being done when people are no longer in front of you, and you no longer have the power to look over their shoulders to see how much they've done, what they've done, whether somebody is watching Netflix when they should be working and stuff. And that's led to a whole lot of problems, like installing spy software, or forcing people to check in and just be active on Messenger. So if you're showing as away on your Office Messenger, it means you're slacking off. And it's led to a whole new market of things like what's called a mouse jiggler, which is a device that shakes your mouse every few minutes so that somebody thinks your computer's not gone off to sleep. And it's the mistrust from both parties, from employees and employers, is staggering. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, that there's a trust deficit, and it's grown during the era of remote work.
So does it require a mindset change from like me as a manager actively seeing people with heads down versus like, I don't really care what your process is, I really need to focus on results? Is that what it takes?
I would say so, Howard, because when you're trying to hold people accountable to outcomes, that's always going to be better than saying, I would like you to be in office for X number of hours. And people are always going to get around things like that. Many organizations are fond of recognizing people saying, oh, Sumit is so hardworking, I get emails at 2 a.m. from him on a regular basis. And the leader has no idea that Sumit knows this behavior is recognized, so he set up his Outlook to schedule email delivery at 2 a.m. And he's been asleep for 5 hours when that email was actually sent out. So gaming the system is just going to become more and more frequent. You're actually doing the organization a disservice if you're not training yourself to trust your employees and say that let's agree on the outcomes. I don't care if you work for 4 hours or the entire shift, as long as we're delivering these particular results.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think the lack of trust brings such wasteful administration and time spent. I mean, talking about getting crafty about mouse jigglers or spyware or scheduling to send emails off in crazy hours. I mean, all of that is just one, silly, and two, unproductive, right? So it's I think raising the game above that, making sure that we're really looking at output And I think that was part of the response that a lot of managers and employees had during the pandemic in healthy organizations, is that, you know, they were saying, okay, well, as an employee, they're saying, okay, well, I'm at home. I need to show that I'm doing my job. I want to make sure that I'm contributing and showing that. And I think that led to a lot of high levels of production, perhaps some overwork and maybe burnout in a lot of cases. But I think that's why we saw a spike in productivity. And then on the other side, managers were required to up their game as well. If they were worried about, hey, are my people actually producing during this time, they were required to have greater amounts of communication, reaching out and talking to people. And I think that for some organizations that's helped their environment, actually managers become more competent. And then for others, managers didn't show up. And as a result, people didn't show up either. I mean, we heard stories of people relocating or finding other jobs at the same time as they were working for a previous employer. So I think that there's on both sides of the scale, there's lessons to be learned there. But other things, of course, with remote work, that has made us more resilient overall. I think that there's been a lot of good manager training that has come out of this. There's been ways to make drive towards a healthier workforce with more focus on well-being, more focused on what is your health. If you're not feeling good, don't come into work. And I think that is we have companies are much more resilient and agile to be able to do that now that they've had a trial period of remote work, even if they're requiring people to come in the office nowadays. So a lot of positive things have come out of this past several years. But another thing that I think we were talking about, where we're just talking about well-being, is some people still don't know how to work remotely or in a healthy way. Either they work too much or they're lonely or so forth. And what are you seeing there, Sumit?
So I largely agree with what you said, Sam. It also depends on what's the role that the organization is playing in all these respects. Like the point about overwork and burnout that you made. Yes, it's real, but it's also created by employers who are telling people that you had a 2-hour commute per day. Now that I've allowed you, or I've given you a perk called remote work, you might as well utilize those 2 hours in working. So I would expect you to put in that extra time and devote it to work. And I mean, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Again, the loneliness angle that you mentioned is also coming in. The good companies are figuring out how to get around it and how to help people still form great bonds with their team members. But in a command and control culture, these things are only going to get worse, where you tend to play people against each other and they don't really have as much of a window to talk to each other. So definitely some of these challenges exist. The really good employers are learning to navigate around them. And that's why for some of the best in-class organizations, employee engagement's actually gone up post-pandemic. And they're actually seeing more people being retained, more people being grateful for the fact that there's investment in well-being. But at the same time, I think we've got some significant distance to cover. Like very recently, one of the big 4 consulting firms, they announced their best year ever, but they announced among the lowest bonuses to be paid out to employees, and it doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, and having that misalignment, I mean, definitely needs to be explained. So and there are strange things that are happening in the economy, global economy, and whether we're dealing with inflation and hard to find people of in a particular skill set. So there's a lot of different things that need to be told that can impact a company's performance like that. But the communication is quite important there. But I do want to kind of go back to this factor, this point that you made about loneliness, and because I heard a couple of podcasters talk about this element, and when we are in a work mindset, I think that there's something to be learned here. When we're in that work mindset, we're used to dealing with our work colleagues and so forth, and when we're interacting, we
Looks
I
like
think
you might have
the
had that power outage. We were
yeah.
doing so well. Well, did you, I know, Howard, you wrote into the chat while we wait for Sam to maybe jump back in. So Sumit, Howard wrote into the chat, if any of your companies are providing training to managers as to how to effectively manage remote teams.
Yeah, I really was posting that for the people participating, but Sumit, maybe, I know you do a lot of research, a lot of reading. Are you finding that companies are now stepping up in providing programs and training programs for managers?
I think it's more a case of just winging it and figuring things out as we go. Especially because I don't believe anyone's really figured out the key on what exactly is an effective remote team and how do I make the team more effective. I mean, in a nutshell, my advice would be get out of the team's way and you'll have an effective team. But I'd say the same for an in-person, in-office team as well. That as a manager, your primary responsibility is to, it's like in a game of football, as a manager, you'd shout out instructions, you'd give people feedback. You wouldn't really jump in and start handling the ball for them. So you're just getting in the way, you'd be slowing them down. Of course, you'll get kicked out by the referee as well. That's a different story. But the fact being that you need to be an enabler rather than a disruptor. And I'd say the same goes for a remote team as well. So as a manager, your role is to create the right kind of culture. Your role is to act as a buffer and absorb the extra pressure that people are feeling. Things like overwork, loneliness, burnout, all the negative things that we spoke about, get rid of them, and you'll have a winning team on your hands.
What about, like new team members? So much of how I grew up in the workforce was the day-to-day interaction among the team. And I think it's hard to kind of replicate that, over Zoom calls. How do you start creating those connections and those bonds when everyone is remote?
It will remain some kind of a challenge, especially for the newer team members. But having things like what Microsoft does is they've got virtual water coolers. So they're trying to replicate the idea of checking in on a coworker or just dropping in where you set up a random time for people to catch up. They're also, so I discovered this being an independent worker myself, that there are different communities where you can log on and co-work at the same time. So you're on camera and you're virtually co-working, where you log on, say hi to each other, just talk about what are your expectations to achieve during this day, and then you put yourself on mute and get back to work. And then you take scheduled breaks and just chit chat about how's the weather, or say your pet cat or dog walks by and you introduce them to the rest of the gang, and so on and so forth. So I think those are icebreakers that people are learning to create during the pace of remote work as well. And I think it does help.
That's interesting, Sumit, and it just reminded me of a thing that we recommended for a client a number of years ago. and this was before way before the pandemic or remote work craze that we've been going through. And so this client was having problems with they had multiple locations across the globe, and then they're having problems with these different cultures popping up in different locations. So basically their Iowa location had a different culture than their culture in California, and significantly different to where they're doing business differently and so forth. They didn't have the shared values. And so one of the initiatives that they were doing, of course, is being better with communication and sharing those values and adopting them in their hiring practices and so forth. But one thing also that was kind of fun that we recommended is putting a live screen, like a video feed, in their break rooms. And so as you walk into a break room, you would also visit the break room in your different locations. You'd have a video screen of the California break room and another one in the Iowa break room. And so you could see people getting coffee in the same time and have actual chats. And they would actually have chats across those different locations as they bumped into people. And so it turned into a kind of a fun thing. So I think that that's something that I haven't thought about in a while, that you just helped in my mind there, Sumit.
I think that's a great idea, and I mean, I can see how it would be useful in the current context as well.
But I really like the idea of if you have that loneliness factor, to be able to go into a shared co-working space, even if it's remote, with colleagues. And now are these established businesses or clubs that you can recommend, or where'd you find these places, Sumit?
So there are different things that you can do. Like there are, I believe it's one of the IT companies that has this concept of giving people small travel stipends for them to work from co-working spaces. So if there are people if there's a sizable chunk of the population in a particular city, giving them some incentive to get together on a couple of days in a week or a month and work from a co-working space. And then there are lots of communities for freelancers and independent workers to just get together, have a Slack channel where you could talk about a new article you've written on LinkedIn and have some kind of a plug for your services. It could be a mental well-being channel where you're talking about how you're feeling on a particular day, sharing some little wins and sharing some frustrations, etc., and just being there as a community to support each other. And larger tech companies like Adobe and Microsoft, they're also taking their employee support groups to these channels so that people can find the right kind of help and support.
And so I think one thing that we should keep in mind in all of this, when we're looking at the traditional work environment where we are meeting face-to-face with our colleagues, and then now there's been the rise of co-working where we're meeting with other professionals in a similar shared environment. And then also in the fully remote environment where we might be meeting people across the globe that we haven't worked with before. But the common theme in all of this is that unlike the traditional work environment where we're just meeting with colleagues, we have the opportunity now in a remote environment to meet with multiple different people, not just our colleagues. And so during the workday. So if you think about expanding this and not being lonely, you can all it takes is communicating with your neighbors and so forth. You can go get coffee at the same time, or have lunch with friends or family, things like this. It doesn't have to be just surrounding the workforce, right? So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are things like there's a bookstore that I regularly buy books from, and they've moved into hosting different kinds of events, and they're actually asking me to conduct an event talking about some of the best books I've read during the year. So they're inviting people in. They hold regular book discussion events and so on. So it's a great way to meet people who are not really colleagues, but who share the same passion. And there are all kinds of clubs. I mean, you could have a club for people who like a particular brand of stationery, and I mean, such clubs do exist, and I've come across them. So it's all about finding that common ground and being able to form those bonds, which is something that companies can definitely learn from, and use these techniques to take their culture online.
So another thing that I'd like to bring up on in the remote environment, it's been easier for companies to really dive more into diversity, equity, and inclusion when we're thinking about opening up. We're not dealing with just a small location around our town or where we're doing business, but we can now involve communities that are outside our own, whether they may be in other countries, such as, in this very case, Sumit being in India, and of course Howard being in New York, and myself in Colorado, and Jules, a native Australian, and which is in LA. So there's diversity that can take place. And so I think that's been another thing of beauty in the remote environment. How have you seen companies actually embrace this diversity in the remote world, Sumit?
It's a mixed bag. Of course, the great thing is to be able to have people from different backgrounds, different geographical areas together. But you need to be sensitive to the time zone differences. Like if you've got somebody from Australia, India, and the US, it's complicated because there could be a 16, 18-hour time zone gap in all the three locations. So finding a time that works for all of the individuals could be difficult. And then you also have to accommodate some of their life stage challenges. Like it might be bedtime for somebody's toddler. It could be time to prepare breakfast for somebody's partner. It could be time to provide medication to somebody you're a caregiver to. So lots of personal priorities would need to be addressed. The other important thing is, are we able to accommodate different personality types and be really inclusive? Like somebody who's an introvert may not really want to have their camera switched on at all times, and they might just be more comfortable talking off camera, not really being stared down by 10 odd people in a meeting. Somebody who's neurodivergent might be more comfortable with email or Slack instead of being put on the spot saying, hey, do you have an opinion right now? So I think we need to do a lot more work on being really inclusive. But the great thing is remote work and the pandemic, it's at least got us started on some part of the journey.
I actually have a really great tool for how we're talking about time zones. I don't know if you guys know the World Meeting Planner. Have you used that website before?
I use one called Time Buddy.
Oh, okay. So maybe it's similar because you basically go in, it's worldmeetingplanner.com, I guess, and you can put in the different cities, and then if you have like a time in mind, like let's say you in India and at 9 a.m. you want a meeting, you can type in the other cities that you want to figure out what time it would be there. It just makes things so easy to just be like, okay, so if it's 9 a.m. in India, it's going to be like 3 p.m. in some other city, and it just takes all the guesswork of like, okay, so if they're 9 hours ahead, so I just type it all into that website, and that it has like a nice grid, which is really helpful. So great tool. If anyone has never used it before, World Meeting Planner, just wanted to throw that in there.
Definitely interesting. And yeah, it works. It seems to work quite similar to Time Buddy, and um, I think this one, it gives a broader range of times it might be a good overlap. So it does. I remember using this one. It does give a red, amber, green kind of an analysis, saying um, it marks times where a person might be sleeping as red, saying 2 a.m. maybe not a great idea for a meeting.
Well, that's actually handy too. That's like really good that it's got the color grading. So Time Buddy as well, guys.
Yeah, I imagine there's other apps too that probably have now, picked up in terms of usage, just in terms of project management and coordination and storage, because you're not, you really have to make sure you have those things standardized as to, okay, I've worked on a file, where is it going, who's going to pick it up? So have you seen things like that, Sumit?
I mean, absolutely. Things like Monday.com and ClickUp, they're really doing well because the asynchronous part of communication can be done so well. So during your waking hours, you could just leave a note for me saying, hey, Sumit, where's this file? We might need it for a client meeting. And you end your work day. When my work day begins, I see that note, I attach the file, and the very next morning, it's right there for you. So managing projects, managing client deliverables, and just communicating with each other, I think it's better than email in that sense, and a lot more effective and efficient.
I feel like Sam has had the perfect timing with these outages, by the way. It's like every time we finish a thought, it's like,
And I guess that's some of the challenges of working remotely too, technology and weather conditions.
Right?
That's right.
It's so seamless.
We were just talking about some of the tools that we need to rely on and use to to keep people on track and coordinate work that's being done. So we were talking about Slack and Monday.com.
Yeah. And that brings up the next another good point. I mean, just keeping people on track of those, setting goals and KPIs and so forth, and driving towards those. So in which I think these tools can really help us be mindful of not just projects and communication, but also when we all have a suffering, and we suffer that if you're not see a person on a daily basis, that you might forget them or forget where we are in certain pieces, or what about their career advancement, and are we treating them fairly with promotions and learning opportunities, things like this. So systems can help us stay more on track and be more responsible all around, for sure. So has there been any developments in keeping or in goals or goal management, Sumit, in the remote environment?
Honestly, I think overall goal setting has been one of the weakest elements of managing performance throughout, even before the remote work era. But companies are evolving, and like we were discussing, becoming a lot more outcome oriented rather than clocking in a certain number of hours. So the goal setting element has become an area of focus. There are managers who are actively trying to improve on it because it's the need of the hour. So since you can't really keep hovering around a person and checking in on them that regularly, it's become critical to just agree on the outcomes they're going to deliver, and then making sure they've got the right kind of resources. So as a manager, you can't really shy away from your responsibility anymore. The onus is on you to make sure your team member has the right kind of tools, they've got the right kind of support to attain or achieve those goals. Otherwise, you're the one who's who's failing in their duty.
I think it's also helped managers really hone their processes, because as we're looking at bringing on people that are remote, tracking projects from a remote standpoint, and goal setting, it really makes us think about, how do we go through the process of getting things done? Because we used to, when we were in the office, we can sit down and walk somebody through a process, and it's pretty easy to do when you're face to face, and you just do what I do, kind of like thing. But and we have to be much more organized in a remote environment, and I think this helps advance companies forward to doing things consistently, documenting processes and procedures and goals effectively, and being better with communication. So I think that it's not something that we should shy away from. As we've seen in the past several months, there's been a trend that, okay, the pandemic is gone on for some time now. It's just worked into the flu season and everything else, and it's not going away anytime soon. So hey, let's just all get back in the office. And so there's a lot of companies that have gone to that extent, and then and have kind of given up on the remote world. But I think that comes to a disservice in a lot of ways. I think that there's something to be said for a hybrid environment, allowing flexibility, and you can attract and retain a much more diversified, highly talented workforce as a result. So I think that the big part of this is documenting those procedures and processes and goals, and then we're just expecting more for our managers in this process to up their game.
Absolutely. I mean, earlier you could rely on an old timer to act as Gandalf kind of a figure, walking a young newbie through the way we do things around here. Let me show you all the office artifacts, how we what we do during our break times, how exactly we manage our schedules. So unless it's documented, that knowledge will be lost forever. So your culture, all the norms, beliefs, attitudes, they need to be written down somewhere for a new person to be able to assimilate them. Otherwise, you'll find your culture just transforming with every wave of new people that's coming in, and we'll find ourselves losing some of the essence of cultures that we're proud of. So documentation, absolutely critical.
So what other areas of culture do you see as being very important in the remote world, Sumit? We've talked about a few things, such as just making sure that we're collaborating and communicating effectively, and we talked a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we kind of touched on well-being a bit. In some factors, but what are you seeing overall? What are the big cultural things that we need to be concerned of?
I think well-being is a larger umbrella which needs to be broken down into subcomponents, like the physical well-being part of it. So it isn't enough to just offer people flexibility to work from anywhere. Are you ensuring that they've got the right kind of office ergonomics set up? Are you providing them support to make sure they've got a comfortable, safe desk, a good chair, etc.? And do you have any allowances for that? For example, companies like GE, they have certified experts who evaluate your posture. They look at your chair. They do it all on video, but they help you in evaluating whether you're setting yourself up for long-term injury by working from home. And I think that's phenomenal, and it's a great value add to an employee. It also makes you feel cared for, that the organization is not really just looking at you as a person occupying a chair. They're really concerned about your well-being. So that's on the physical well-being part of it. You can make taking certain amount of breaks mandatory and say, I don't really want to see you eating at your desk, etc. Mental well-being, the conversation has moved on from training people to giving them the right kind of tools to be able to focus on their own priorities. So in companies like Accenture, people are encouraged to put a footer on emails saying, I'm sending you this email at a time that's convenient to me. Please don't feel pressurized to respond to it the moment it drops into your inbox or something of that sort. So they're trying to encourage people that just because you've seen an email does not necessarily mean you've got to respond to it right then and there. Big hit that's happened during the pandemic is financial well-being, where there's a lot more uncertainty about whether you'd be able to cater to any urgent requirement in case of an emergency. And by providing solutions like on-demand pay or low-cost or no-cost loans, companies are trying to step in and help their people. In addition, things like counseling, things like debt restructuring sessions, etc., along with sessions on how to maximize your earning potential by making the most of things like stock purchase plans. They're helping people in saving more money. They're also helping people in earning more money, and I think that's really, really responsible.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing that I think that is quite important for companies to continue to innovate. I mean, we went through a forced innovation because of the remote work phase due to the pandemic, but and we saw how fast we could adapt and move forward. Now, there's other things that are coming forth in the economy, such as in the United States, we're dealing with a potential recession we've been talking about for quite some time. And some say that we're in it already, and others say that the worst is yet to come. But we need to continue to make our businesses more agile and resilient to weather those pieces, whether it's economic or another calamity that we went through. The other piece of being more resilient is thinking about being more resilient with our workforce. I mean, there's many different ways of working nowadays. There's those full-time employees, there's part-time, there's gig workers, freelancers, there's consultants and contractors. I mean, there's tons of different things, and the contingency workforce is quite large. And Jules comes from a place in Australia where the contingency workforce is almost half, or if not half, the population by now. So people have a lot of different ways that they show up for work. And so the important thing is when we're designing the workforce of the future, we need to make sure that we take all these different pieces into consideration, and also start thinking out of the box of, not just, we're so used to thinking about employees, but there's so many other types of workers that are driving results to the organization and deserve to be treated in a fair way, in a way that's in alignment with our overall workforce as a whole. So how we think about the workforce needs to change. Also, other aspects of we went through the remote work transformation. What's the next transformation that we can provide as far as work flexibility? Is that going to be perhaps the 4-day work week, the flexible Fridays in the summers? Whatever makes sense for your demographic. But the important thing is for us to continue to innovate and move forward. I think that one important thing that was found or discovered during this process is that productivity is not so time-based as we've once thought it was. Productivity is something that's flexible, and there's some organizations that have found that they can get as much done in a week in 4 days that they once were doing in 5 days. And so the lessons to be learned there is let's reward that time back to our people. And if we're going to be able to measure good performance, measure productivity effectively in our organizations, then let's reward our people with that increased performance and the success of the company, and be even a better place to work at in the future. So a lot of good things to think about.
Absolutely. I mean, one could just break it down into three aspects and say that the future could be divided into the future of work, the future of workplace, and the future of the worker. So by nature, work and jobs are evolving. I mean, 15 years ago, jobs like Uber driver, data scientist, all of them didn't exist. Even things like content marketing or digital marketing did not exist. So we've had a spate of new jobs that's definitely going to continue. So what are the new skills? What are the new roles that we can aspire towards? And there already are people thinking about how to best utilize the skills of an aging demographic as well. And that's why countries like China, they've got a special university for senior citizens, people who are above 60 years of age, to give them advanced skills so that they can continue being productive till they're about 75 or 80 years old. So if they want to work, they can. And that's how the future of work and workers is changing. Of course, we've got AI and robots working alongside us. So how do we function better? How do we use our gray cells for more intellectual work and leave technology to do the more repetitive or rapid computing kind of things? Workplaces have shifted because of the pandemic. So overnight transformation from in-person, in-office work to remote. But even before that, thanks to technology, there's been change that's not been talked about as much. Like one of the industries that's been at the forefront of digital transformation is automotive. And there are companies that have been 3D printing different automotive parts. So you're located in a remote region, you need a spare part. It's prohibitively expensive to ship it across to you from wherever it's being manufactured. Therefore, there's a 3D printer, say a couple of 100 miles from you, where they just print that component and send it across to you. Technically, that is remote manufacturing, right? So your auto component is not being manufactured in a factory. It's being manufactured much closer to where the end customer is.
That's great. I mean, we need to think of those things. So, I mean, a part of what we're doing here on the People Strategy Forum at the end of the year is really reflecting on the past year and those lessons that have been learned, so that we can plan ahead for a successful 2023. And one of the next speaker is going to help us with that is Dr. Dante Vaughn, who's going to be talking about some of the lessons learned from the Great Resignation, and how we need to take some of those pieces and how can we better improve our talent attraction and retention of our people for the future. And so join us next week on the People Strategy Forum to hear Dr. Dante Vaughn speak on that topic. So I know that a lot of you out there have been going through a wonderful holiday season. And as I'm bracing for a lot of weather where I'm at, as I've been dropping in and out on this podcast on just with power outages. So I hope everybody's staying safe out there and across the different storms that they might be experiencing. And but a special shout out and thank you to Sumit for joining us today and talking about the evolution of remote work and what are the things to come for next year and so forth. So thank you, Sumit.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks, Howard and Jules.
Yes. Great. It's great to get together with everyone here, even if only virtually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure is.
Great. Well,
It's
thank
close
everyone.
Yeah, this is our
Yeah.
last one for the year. Next year it's January. So next week it's January. So
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
right.
great.
Happy New Year to everyone. Yes,
Thank
for
you.
sure.
Thank you all
Great.
for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Talk to you
Thanks,
soon,
everyone.
and talk to you in 2023.
Bye.
Yeah.
Right.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.